All right, I think we can get started. Uh, right, so welcome to SoftArt ERP Seminar series, and thanks so much for joining. On popular request, we made today's series focused on NetSuite's financial management capabilities. And in particular, we'll be covering the record to report process in NetSuite, as well as NetSuite's custom reporting abilities. Before we get started, I'd just like to give you an idea of who we are and a little bit about our services. So SoftArt is an official NetSuite, Acumatica, Oracle, and Microsoft ERP and database partner. These we have worked with a lot of other solutions in the past, but these four are the main solutions that we work with now. We've been in the industry for 20 years and have worked on countless ERP deployments by now. We specialize in ERP selection, implementation, consulting, migrations, and 24/7 support. To give you an idea of our services, the most important one here is ERP selection and implementation. We actually work with you through the process of selecting the right ERP as well as project development, all the way through to implementation, testing, post-production, and 24/7 support. Our experts will be at your side, ensuring you have access to all the knowledge that you need throughout the journey. Apart from ERP selection and implementation, we also offer services in ERP migrations, ERP and database upgrade and patching, custom product development as is needed by a lot of clients, remote and on-site staffing for your IT or database needs, and remote support, which you will have access to throughout the process if you choose to partner with SoftArt. All right, so now without much delay, I'd like to hand over to Ken, who's our NetSuite practice lead, and he'll take us through NetSuite's record to report process as well as custom reporting capabilities. Over to you, Ken.
Yep. Thanks, Siddhant. So let me just share my screen. Right. So for records report in NetSuite, it's actually more focused on your general financials, right? So everything covering from your journal entry posting to approvals of those journal entries, and then to eventually having reports for those transactions that were posted. Essentially, there's a lot to cover for records report, but I wanted to focus on some of the key setups, mainly on the company structure and setting up segmentations. So those would be very important when we're trying to create the reports later on, because reports are actually dependent on what kind of subsidiaries, what kinds of segmentations are associated with transactions. And you will see that later on as we try to do with the demo. And then some of the features that are usually manual in other accounting systems that are already automated in NetSuite. So those are amortization and allocation. So usually for other accounting systems, those are still handled manually or even done in Excel and then just imported over to your accounting systems, right? But in NetSuite, there's actually already built-in amortization template setup and an allocation setup as well, where we can do those expense spread outs for different transactions. And then, of course, we're going to try to tackle standard reports that you can do, what filters you can use, and then how you can try to customize reports on your own, and then maybe some customized reports that are workable with the help of implementation partners like us. Okay, so without further ado, let's try to talk about company setup or structure, which actually determines your subsidiary structure, and of course your reporting consolidation when it comes to balance sheets and income statements later on. So in NetSuite, it can actually handle multiple subsidiaries in one system. So that's actually one of the advantages of NetSuite. Whether you're doing it on a multinational scale or just within one country, NetSuite can do that. So one of the main advantages here is even if you're doing multinational subsidiaries in NetSuite, there's actually multi-currency setups that you can do. So we're not going to tackle that specifically today. And most importantly, there are intercompany journal entries and automation of those elimination that can be done within NetSuite. So if you can just imagine you being a big conglomerate within the US or maybe even US and other international markets, One of the probable difficulties you would be having is the task to actually close periods because of intercompany eliminations, right? So in NetSuite, since every entity is within one system and one platform, the intercompany journal entries are covered, or everything is within NetSuite. So there's some configurations along the way that has to do with that, but once the configuration is set up at the implementation phase, the eliminations later on when you try to close periods would be automated. So NetSuite, it actually takes care of marking which transactions are for elimination and then automatically generating those elimination journal entries for you without you having to manually create those. So that's one big advantage of having the correct subsidiary setup in NetSuite. Of course, that goes without saying that the subsidiary setup must be correct. Of course, you have to identify which one is your parent entity and which one are your children entities, like this example that you have on the screen. Apart from setting up the subsidiaries, which is very important for reporting, we can also talk about the different filters or different segments that are also going to be used for reporting purposes. So those are departments, locations, and classes. So these are the native segmentations that we use in NetSuite to report for to filter for reports. So departments work as in usual departments in regular enterprises. So it's mostly cost centers. They can be associated to employees, to transactions, and to even item records or records within NetSuite. Okay. Locations are used to tag geographical representations. So if you have multiple offices in different countries or different locations, you can actually tag transactions to those locations so that later on, when if you want to maybe look at an income statement with only Australia or UK as the location, then that can be used as a filter later on. And then classes probably is the more flexible of the three. So this one is usually it's used for lines of business or revenue streams. So if you have multiple different products or different streams that you offer to customers, usually classes make up that segment or that section. But in other cases, of course, if there are other classes other than revenue streams, we can actually repurpose the classes. So if you don't really use classes right now, we can repurpose this for other segmentations that you might want to use as filters. These three are the native segmentations that we have in NetSuite, although we have the capability to create more segments or to create more filters like these, but those are going to come through customization, right? So that's when you call an implementation partner like SoftArt to do those additional segments if you need to have more ways, if you want to filter your report and slice and dice that data in a different reporting. Yeah. So I'm gonna jump straight to the two features that I mentioned a while back, which is amortization and allocation. So we're gonna talk about the reporting and how the segments work on those at the tail end of the discussion. So I wanted to focus on amortization and allocation as well. So of course, amortization schedules for the accountant people there is actually how you piecemeal realize expenses to a set of periods or a length of time. So usually these are prepayments for rent or prepayments for insurance that you have to amortize throughout a specific span of time, right? And usually the difficulty here for other accounting systems is you might recognize prepaid insurance for, let's say, 50,000 for July, and then you might fail or you might forget to actually manually amortize that prepaid expense for the rest of the year, because of course accounting standards dictate that the expense must be recognized per period of usage, right? So you cannot you cannot recognize the whole expense, let's say for 50,000 for just July, but you have to realize that throughout the span or the period that it's going to be used for. So amortization is also where you can put in your depreciation schedules. So if you don't want to actually purchase a fixed assets module, that's also available in NetSuite, because you don't really have a lot of fixed assets and you just want to save, you can do the depreciation within the amortization schedules feature, which is standard in NetSuite. So I'm going to show you a sample here that uses the amortization schedule. Okay, so this is a sample that I created earlier. Let me show you the journal entry. Okay, So this is journal entry where I posted a prepaid expense. So this is a prepaid insurance, a rent expense, and then posted it to accounts payable. Usually this can also be posted through a bill, but for easier reference, I just created it through a journal entry, right? So prepaid expenditures, that's what I wanted to amortize as a prepaid insurance. So I actually associated a schedule with it. So during the setup, we're going to explain to you how those schedules are associated with the prepaid lines. But if you actually click on the schedule here, it shows you how the expense or the insurance is going to be amortized from July to November of 2023. So of course, this part right here where you determine what posting periods are going to be affected is also part of the setup or the configuration, which is very simple. But essentially, this report or this schedule shows you how much is going to be recognized per period. So for July, 14,000, then you might see a difference here on the amounts, because this is also dependent on what method is going to be used to do the amortization. Usually we don't recommend straight line amortization where it's just going to be even throughout the periods. I usually recommend prorating the amortization. So depending on how many days were used for July, for example, and how many days were used in November. That's why you notice here that everything in the middle, they're actually equal, because they're whole, all of them are full months, right? So NetSuite did an equal amortization for those 3 months, and then for July, which is not a full month, it just posted 14,000. And then for November, which in my case is not also a full month, it only posted 11,000. So there's going to be a lot of configuration here that can determine how the amortization would be computed. But this is usually the scenario I recommend for my clients, where there's a proration on the actual days used per month, just to arrive at a more accurate accounting for that amortization. So going back to the journal entry as well, you might notice that there's also a rent expense here. And that is what I did there is actually related to the other feature that I wanted to talk about, which is allocation schedule. So if amortization schedules allow you to realize expenses through a span of time or a span of periods, allocation schedules allow you to distribute the expenses to different segments, right? Usually the scenario I see for clients is that they put maybe rent expense to one department, and then they try to distribute that expense when they do a closing, right? So they compile all rent expenses and then they post it to the different departments at month end or at year end, which is a tedious task, of course, because you have to accumulate all of the rent expense together, and then you have to determine, okay, how much does department A get, department B, department C, and so on and so forth. So NetSuite has streamlined a process for that to make it easier. So instead of having the team or the finance team do a manual work of consolidating all of the expenses that need to be allocated, NetSuite now automatically does that. And you can see here in an allocation schedule. Okay. So this is the allocation schedule that I associated with that rent. Okay. You can see here that under the source, it's just going to look for all the rent expenses posted everywhere. So once you filter this, or once you identify this to NetSuite, NetSuite's going to be running that engine to look for all rent expenses posted everywhere. And it's going to allocate that based on the destination that you have here. So on this particular configuration, the destination is going to be divided into three departments. So instead of rent expense just going to one department, it's now going to be distributed to three, which is administration, engineering, and marketing. And then the most important part of this equation is actually the weight. Okay, so this is how the computation is going to be divided among those three departments. Usually, weights, in my experience, clients usually want to make use of headcount, which is viable as well. So how many headcounts were used for admin, engineering, and marketing, then they just do that as the weight. Usually clients also use square footage, if it's a rent, right? So the area that was covered by the different departments, or some other weight proportioning method that are used. But essentially, this weight here is something that would be put in manually. So if you wanted to divide it by 3 equally, you can certainly do that. Or if there's a specific weight that you want to assign, you can also do that. So this is the most important part of the allocation schedule. So once the allocation schedule is created, you would notice here that it does allow you to create a journal entry. So when you create that, depending on how much rent expense is gathered. So right now it's 12,500. So you can notice here it's 12,500. Coming from our journal entry, it's 12,500. So it's equal. So this is the only rent expense that was gathered by NetSuite for this period. So if you look at this allocation here, administration, engineering, and marketing, and now the expense is allocated 50, 25, and 25 based on the allocation schedule that we've set up earlier. Right. So in relation to amortization and allocation, so of course I've shown you the schedules and how they're going to be recognized. But for amortization specifically, there's reports that can be done to actually further look at the analysis of the amortizations. So if you have multiple amortizations and you want to keep track of them, NetSuite has standard reports that you can follow that can give you an overview of what the amortizations are looking at currently. So you can see a forecast of the amortization here. You can see a waterfall and a roll forward as well. So these are all standard reports for amortization. It gives you an idea for this one example, how much is going to be the amortizations, what are the amortizations that are currently active. Deferred expense waterfall is giving you how much was recognized per month and how much is the total unrecognized in the previously. And then of course roll forward gives you the rolling balance of the prepayments and the amortizations. So all of these reports I just showed you, they are standard and they come ready in NetSuite without us having to do anything with them. But of course, if there's any changes there, that's where you would probably want to go out and reach out to us to do changes to these amortization reports. So other than the amortization reports that are standard there, I also wanted to talk about briefly the standard reports that are also available in NetSuite. So of course, income statements, balance sheets, cash flow statements, even general ledger and trial balance. Those are very standard reports that every accounting system has. So, for example, for income statement, it also comes pro forma um, as to the different sections. And there's tools within in the statements that allows you to either expand or collapse the report. So with just a click of a button, you can see the total income and the total expenses. Further clicking down here, collapsing it, there's more detail as you go. And the advantage here is actually if you go once you go to view detail, it gives you all of the breakdown of all the accounts. So all of the transactions that make up all of the different lines here. If you click on view detail, just open it in the new link. It's gonna show you what specific transactions make up total revenue products, total selling expenses. And right now, since this is a demo environment, it's just a very limited number of transactions that you see here. But this would come handy if, especially if you're going through audit, right? And you wanted, and probably the auditor wants to pick samples from specific GL lines. You could provide them the list of the transactions that make up that line, and then they could use that as the basis of their sampling. And furthermore, if you want to drill down, it's not just looking at the list here from the reports directly. So you can actually click through the lines. So for example, what makes up revenue products? I can just click through this journal entry here, and it opens the specific transaction or the specific journal entry that affected that balance. So that's coming directly from the report to the actual transaction record. And that is true not just for income statement, of course. If you want to do that for balance sheet as well, you can click on the detail by clicking on the line, and it shows you the breakdown, what are the transactions under it. And then you can just click through the different um, individual transactions that make up the account. Okay. So let's go back to income statement here for a second. And this is a very straightforward income statement. Usually this works for smaller companies, but if there's a lot more analysis that has to be taken into consideration, usually income statements, they want to have that in the context of, I want to see the income statement per department, I want to see income statement per location or per subsidiary. You don't have to worry about that in NetSuite. Those are pretty straightforward filters that you can do on your own. So for example, for this income statement, which is pretty standard, right? If you want to look at it, like say, I want to look at this income statement per subsidiary. So if you want the balance of subsidiaries side by side. So all you need to do that is actually to change this column here to subsidiary. And that just what it does is the column for the amounts would be changed to the context of per subsidiary. So if you refresh this report, it now shows you the balance per line per subsidiary. So of course, depending on how much transactions are in each subsidiary, but it's going to be sliced and diced that way. There are other options here if you want to look at it, let's say per department. You can do that as well. And by doing this, you are looking at the total transaction or the total amount per line, and just dividing it or just structuring it in a way that you see it per department. But if let's say, for example, you wanted to look at it at a specific only, like instead of looking at it side by side, maybe you just wanted to create a report. Hey, I wanted to generate an income statement specifically for this department only. So what you can do there is you can go to click on more. So this is where the filters come in, where those segments come into place importantly. So you can determine here the different filters at the bottom. So, okay, I just want to look at income statement specific for admin. Okay, and you want to refresh that. Of course, if there's anything related to admin, that's just going to be filtered there. So the income statement that you're looking at right now is specific only to the admin department. So if you wanted to do multiple departments, you can also do that. So if you wanted to look at admin, maybe and operations together, you can just hold down the control button, just click on OK. So if there's more numbers coming from admin and operations together, there's just going to be the total here shown in the income statement.
Just to jump in
So
here as well, Ken. So we have a question in chat saying, can we also see the home screen for people in the finance department? And since we only have a few minutes left, I thought that would be a good opportunity to maybe focus on roles, dashboards, and some basic reports in the last few minutes.
yeah, for sure. Okay.
Perfect.
Let me go back to. Sorry. Is there anything else?
Oh, no, no, I just said perfect.
Okay, so let me just go back to my home dashboard. So as you might notice here, just going to home. So this is where you log in initially, right? So at the top right corner of the screen, that's where you see what role is actually currently online in my user access. So this is my user access, and right now I'm logged in as an administrator. So of course, there are different roles in the system, that different features, different functions, and different accesses. So the administrator has the full level access to everything in NetSuite. So from transactions to different setups to customizations, the administrator can do it all. That's why the dashboard here is not very customized, because the administrator would be the one to set it up for themselves. But essentially, the administrator has total control of the system. But let's say I wanted to look at it at the controller level, right? So someone in finance, when they log into NetSuite, this is usually what they would see as standard. So without us doing anything here to change it, this comes standard out of the package for NetSuite. So once we install NetSuite and then we give you access, this is what you see from day one. So these are standard reports, standard KPIs that NetSuite has compiled throughout the years of their experience. You know what they're expecting the controller to see, what probably would be the transactions or the records that they want to jump to. It's already very pre-configured in that way because of the suite success methodology, right? So NetSuite understands that there are already business processes that are pretty common for all controllers, and that they just consolidate all of them in one dashboard. Um, if you change that, of course, to someone, say, from the executive standpoint, the dashboard changes again. So now it's more high level, full management style. What kind of data I want to see from the bird's point of view for the company. So that's going to be what the executive will be seeing right out of the bat. All these dashboards, KPIs, and reports you see on the screen are very configurable. So if there are specific reports that maybe there's a custom report that you do right now for your company, and then you want the controller to see that when they log into the screen, we can actually create that report and then add that into their dashboard. So whenever they log in, they don't have to, look for that report somewhere in NetSuite. It would be a shortcut, or it would be a direct report on the screen in the dashboard immediately. And I'm just going to show you something here. The change in the layout, or however you want to change the tiles here on the screen, is very easy. It doesn't actually need a lot of technical work or configuration to change what they look like, where they fit, what's the size, what's the layout. All of that is very easy to do. So even someone who's not really well versed in NetSuite yet can do this on their own without the need for implementation teams to do it.
We have another question in the chat, Ken, asking,
Mhm.
can we customize the dashboard on a user level?
Yes, you can actually have the users customize their own dashboard. So I was showing you earlier, each user can actually change the layout of their screen. However, we recommend, or what I usually recommend, is there must be a centralized dashboard setting. So, for example, the administrator would create a dashboard for all um, finance people or for all sales people. So everyone has a uniform dashboard. And then it's just a matter of maybe allowing certain roles or certain users to be able to change their own dashboards if they want to. But in general, yes, the dashboards can be changed individually per user.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any other questions, Siddhan?
Yeah, I'm just checking for that actually. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. For these last 5 to 10 minutes, we'll only be focusing on questions. You
Mhm.
can also raise your hand and I can unmute you to ask verbally.
Yeah. What we did here as the demo is a very high level overview of the capabilities of NetSuite. Of course, there's a lot more to unpack there, the different features and functions that NetSuite can do. But these are very basic features that come out of the box for NetSuite without us having to buy additional modules or to do specific customizations to fit those requirements. If you have requirements that are captured by those features, then they are very easily covered with the most basic NetSuite package out there.
Yeah, we have another question in chat asking, is there SCM in NetSuite? And another one, maybe you can take these together. Will there be another demo going into procurement and by extension, I guess, other areas as well?
Sorry, can you repeat the first question, Siddhan?
Is there SCM in NetSuite, supply chain management?
Yeah, yeah, there's supply chain management within NetSuite. So this is just records report that we covered today. So it's very financials, general accounting basic. But NetSuite does have order to cash cycle, which goes for your sales orders to creating invoices to collections and then managing ARs, of course. Then you also have procure to pay, which focuses on your expenditure cycle. So how you procure items or goods, how you purchase them, the approvals that relate to them, POs, vendor bills, item receipts, expense reports. Those are all covered by procure to pay. So yeah, there's also vendor management within NetSuite and supplier management. So those covers those SCMs, SCM capability, and those also come right out of the box from NetSuite. So without having to buy additional features or bundles, those are standard uh, features that you can do within NetSuite.
And perhaps I can take the second one.
Yeah.
Will there be another demo going into procurement? Yes, we actually plan to do these seminars rather, bi-weekly, hopefully, or maybe on a monthly basis. And we'll be covering almost all the different process areas that ERP systems usually cover. So going forward, you can expect seminars on procurement, design to build, order to cash, and other process areas as well. And not only that, as I mentioned at the beginning, we actually also work with Acumatica, Dynamics, and Oracle. So you can also expect seminars on those solutions as well in the near future. If there are any more questions, we'll wait for another couple of minutes. Otherwise, we'll just get ready to wrap up. Is there CRM functionality in NetSuite? Yes, there is, Charles. So NetSuite actually comes with, I think Ken can perhaps add to this as well. But as far as I know, NetSuite actually comes with some basic CRM functionality in some of their packages at the very least,
Mhm.
which often replaces standalone CRM solutions as well. And Ken, if there's anything you'd like to add to that, please feel free.
Yeah. There's a business module within NetSuite as well called Lead to Code. Usually that covers the basics of the CRM, right? So from um, monitoring your leads to converting them to prospects, and then to converting them again to sales or to sales orders. Those can all be done within NetSuite standard. Then if you have more rigid requirements towards CRM, we also have the capability to integrate with other CRM bundles. And there are also other add-on features in case the most basic CRM functions within NetSuite cannot cover your requirements. But yeah, there are CRM functionalities within NetSuite. And the good thing about that is they're all interrelated. So even if you do CRM in NetSuite, you can also do SCM in NetSuite, and you can also do your general ledger accounting in NetSuite, right? So every part of those processes communicate with one another. So it's like a one system for all of those processes together. So you don't have to jump around system to system, software to software, doing different things, but you can do all of those things in one system in NetSuite already.
Perfect. All right, it seems like people are headed out, and we'll also wrap up from our end. And if you guys have any more questions, please feel free to contact me at Siddhant, that's SIDDHANT, at softart.co, and I'll be happy to answer them there. All right, thanks everyone for joining, and we look forward to having you on our future seminars as well. And yeah, have a good day ahead. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.